My dear friends, I hope this finds you well. Our shul, Blake Street Hebrew Congregation, like many other shuls around Australia and the world, have just this past week and some before made the difficult decision to temporarily suspend services. We're doing so for the sake of social distancing and trying to do our part in stemming the tide of this vicious virus and ensuring that our shuls do not become the epicenters of an outbreak like unfortunately have in many Jewish communities around the world. And as I thought about this difficult decision to shut down a shul, unprecedented to do such a thing, I'm reminded of a story. It's one of my favorite stories of two brothers, Reb Zusha and Reb Elimelech. They are two famous Chassidic lights. They are the most incredible Chassidic teachers, and really inspired many with their deep Torah, but also their wonderful tales. And the story goes that Reb Zusha and Reb Elimelech, they always used to get up to no good. They were a bunch of merry pranksters who would travel from town to town, and they would dress like beggars. They didn't dress like rabbis did in those days. They dressed like beggars, and they would try to find people and talk to simple people and connect them to God, to find them and talk to them about God. And the story goes that one day they were in a particular Eastern European town, and they're hanging out in the streets dressed like beggars, and the police came and they swept through, picked up all the beggars, including Reb Zusha and Reb Elimelech, and threw them in jail. And so there, Reb Zusha and Reb Elimelech find themselves in some, dingy, dark European jail, which under the best of times was not good for anybody, and certainly not the Jews. And Reb Zusha and Reb Elimelech are sitting there, and finally, the day is getting darker, and Reb Elimelech looks over and he sees a tear streaming down Reb Zusha's cheek. And Reb Elimelech says to Reb Zusha, what's going on? What's the problem? And he says, well, look outside. Look outside. It's getting dark, and we need to daven mincha. The time for the afternoon service is upon us. We need to pray, and once it gets dark, we won't be able to daven mincha anymore. And Reb Elimelech says, yeah, okay, so let's daven. He says, well, no, but look over there in the corner of the room was a bucket that was filled with human waste. And the law is that you cannot pray in front of human waste. So Reb Elimelech says, okay, you're right. He gets up and he bangs on the bars of the jail cell. And this big lumbering, warden comes up and says, what do you want? And he says, well, excuse me, but we need to pray. And, there's a bucket of waste right here. Would you be so kind as to remove it? And the warden looks at him and laughs and then goes and sits back down. And they're sitting there, and now they're both distraught. And I said, what are we going to do? We need to pray. And they close their eyes and they start to cry, and they're really upset because you need to pray in this moment. And then Reb Elimelech steps up and he says, the same God that commanded us to pray mincha, to pray the afternoon service, is the very God who commanded us not to pray when there's a bucket of human waste in front of us. Right now, the thing that we are supposed to do is not pray. We are not supposed to pray. This is what God wants from us right now. And Reb Zusha's eyes light up, and Reb Elimelech's eyes light up, and they get up, and they're so happy, and they're so excited. What God wants from us is not to pray right now. This is the will of God. And they start to dance, and they start to sing, and they dance, and they're dancing around this bucket of fecal matter. And the warden comes up and says to him, And, says to them, what are you guys doing? What's going on? And they say, the bucket. God told us not to pray because there's a bucket of feces. We're so happy. This is what God wants from us. And the warden says, you Jews, you're crazy. And he opens up the door and he says, if this is what's making you happy, I'm getting rid of this bucket. He takes the bucket out of the jail cell. And then they look at each other and they can finally daven mincha. Now, right now, we are not being asked not to pray. But the will of God seems to be that we are being asked not to pray in minyanim, in shuls. However, we are being asked to pray in the deepest way as individuals and as a collective. So right now there are all these minyanim that are splitting apart, individuals who are separating apart into their different, into their homes. Now, my friends, our prayers all together, the prayers of Am Yisrael, whether it's through Zoom or through Skype or through Facebook or just somebody sitting there in their living room praying, and there's some minyan, whatever it is, all of those prayers as individuals, now all of our individual prayers are coming together. They are coming together. And so now is not a time not to pray. The mitzvah is not to pray. The mitzvah is to pray all the more so now as individuals and as a collective. Shul life, community life, life in general is going to take on a very different tone over the next few weeks. Who knows what's going to happen? But now is a time for increased prayer, increased acts of kindness when we can, how we can, however we can in this new situation. We're going to get through this together. We're going to get through this. Somehow this seems to be, this is what God's will is right now. And there's something that's kind of out of control seemingly. And we give ourselves up to the lack of control, but do what we can. My friends, may our individual prayers and may our collective prayers be heard. May Hashem bring healing and health for the whole world. May it come speedily and in our days. And I look forward to continue to learn and to grow with all of you over these next few weeks and beyond.